Hey buddy. Hey buddy. Oh, does that feel good? Yes, that feels good. Yes.
What's up everybody and welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about color grading, specifically color grading the footage that you just saw. And that footage was shot last year in Colorado on an elk hunt. And we're going to be discussing coloring S-Log footage without using Luts. So let's go ahead and jump on in and I'll show you the process of how I color S-Log footage and just about any other footage that I get. So before we get too far, I just want to say coloring S-Log footage or any other log or raw footage, you can definitely use Luts. I just want to go ahead and show this for the people who maybe don't have the money to buy Luts, don't want to put their money into Luts, and really just want to find a way to color without using Luts. And then later on, I will show you a LUT that I prefer to use on a lot of different things and how I manipulate it to get a look that I like. That'll give you a sense of how to use Luts and then how to color grade using Luts. But first, I want to focus on not using Luts and how we can go about coloring our footage without using those Luts, because it can be done even if people tell you that you have to use a LUT, especially to color stuff like S-Log footage. Alright guys, so jumping into Premiere here, we are going to see the sequence that we just watched. This is from Colorado last year, and we're going to be coloring this entire sequence here using Lumetri color and a simple adjustment layer to put this color on all this footage at one time. So the first thing that we'll do is we'll come down here to this new item tab. We'll click this. We'll make a new adjustment layer. We're gonna hit OK. Then I want to rename this so we know what it is. Name it color. The reason for that is so it doesn't get mixed up with this adjustment layer, which is the bars that we've added by using the crop. And this is a simple way. You add an adjustment layer, add a crop effect, and then you can crop the top and bottom, and it adds the widescreen bars for effect. Cool little tip there. So getting back into coloring, what we'll do is we'll drag this color adjustment layer in, and we're going to extend this out over our entire sequence, and we'll select that, and then we'll come up and click the color tab. Make sure our Lumetri scopes over here are turned on, and what we're going to be paying attention to starting off is this waveform monitor. This 0 is our blacks or shadows, 100 is our whites or our highlights. You do not want your shadows or your highlights to hit the 0 or 100. The reason for that is where you're going to crush your blacks and crush your highlights, and you'll start to lose detail. So starting off, we're going to come over here to our curves tab. We will make a point right here in our shadows and right here in our highlights. And I'm going to simply start off by just slowly dragging these shadows down until they get fairly close to the bottom. I like where they're at right here. They're not all the way down because we don't want to crush the blacks, and everything's looking pretty good in the shadows. So the next thing we'll do is we'll come over here and we're going to grab our highlights and start to bring these up just a little bit. And we'll probably stop right in here. We notice we don't want these to get too close to crushing, and everything in the highlights looks pretty good. We haven't lost any details. So we're gonna leave it where it's at for now. The next thing we'll wanna do is come over here to the creative tab. This is where we're gonna adjust our saturation. So we'll just slowly start bringing this up. It's starting to look good, but I wanna give it a little bit more saturation because where we were at was super luscious and I liked the way it looked. That's looking pretty good there. So we'll blow this up here. Notice everything's pretty good and saturated. We haven't lost any of our blacks. We've got all of our highlights. They all look good. Nothing's overexposed or underexposed, and our colors look nice. So what I'll do next is I'm going to close this creative tab, and I'm going to come up here to our basic correction because this is looking a little bit green to me. So I just want to adjust the tint and move it a little bit towards the magenta. So we're just going to try a slight adjustment of 3. You'll notice it added, turn it off and back on. It's kind of added some magenta to their skin tones. It's brought the brown and the magenta out in his camo. And I think that gives it a pretty good look. That way it's not overly green, These adjustments here in the tint section should never be super dramatic. Same with the temperature really, unless it's really far off. I think the temperature in this image is pretty good, but again, this grass is still pretty green, and in reality, this was actually fairly yellowish amber. So we're just gonna warm this image up just a touch. We'll just go up, try 10, maybe a little too much, bring this down. And to me, that looks pretty good. You know, we've kind of made this green here a little more amberish yellow. We've warmed the whole image up, and I like a warm image. So what I'll do next is I'll come back over here to the curves, and we're gonna play with these Hsl tabs. So the first thing we'll adjust is our hue versus hue. And I want to, again, make this grass more amber orangish. And so I'm just gonna kind of select here towards the end of the yellow, and the beginning of this orangish red, and we're just gonna simply add a point here in the middle and push it up towards the reds. And this right here, to me, let's blow it up again. That's looking pretty good. You've got a little more orange in here. You've got some more separation between the grass and the trees. And that's what I'm going for, is to kind of separate the grass and the trees. Because beforehand, you know, look how green they were. And now we're giving them a little bit more of a warmer orange. And that's the look that I'm going for in this image. So the next thing, I'm gonna just do the same hue adjustment with the blues, except I'm gonna bring these down and make these blues a little bit deeper. You'll notice in the sky, if we undo this, the sky's gonna get a little bit of a deeper blue to it, and that's what I want. And that's where I kind of want the sky to be. You want the sky to pop and be a little bit more of a deeper blue. And to adjust that even further, we can select hue versus saturation. And so this is only gonna affect the saturation of the colors that we choose. So we're gonna set 2 points here on the ends of the blues. And then we're just gonna drag the center of the blue up, and that looks pretty good. Turn it off, back on. You can see a little bit of an adjustment there. Not too much, it's just bringing the sky to life a little bit more. Now, the other thing that I wanna do while we're in this hue versus saturation tab is select these greens, and let's separate the trees from the grass even further. And let's push that saturation just a little bit there and bring those trees out. Let's blow this up again. So now we've kind of given the sky a more blue, the trees are a little more green, the grass is nice and orange, yellowish looking, and I think this image overall is looking pretty good. So the big reason why we apply the lumetri to the adjustment layer is so that we can apply the same color grade to all the footage at once. And while you may say, well, you can just copy the lumetri to every clip, if we decide later on that we want to change the look, maybe we want to go back and we don't want that grass to be orange, we want to bring it back and make it green, rather than going back and changing every single lumetri, we can just go change that one setting in lumetri on the adjustment layer, rather than going and needing to change all the clips. So that's why I color an adjustment layer versus all the clips individually, because making little tweaks that you want to change later on can be applied much easier than going through and doing it the same way over and over and over to all the clips. So that's the big reason for the adjustment layer. And also, all this footage was shot in roughly the same time frame. This was all within the same hour, hour and a half or so. And so for the most part, our lighting is staying the same throughout. So our colors aren't going to change much unless we go in and out of different areas, maybe say under a tree where there's more shadow and the sunlight isn't warming the image as much. You might see a difference, and we might need to make tweaks there, which we're going to do in this next clip. So notice in this next clip, it's a little bit darker. So what we can do is we can just take this color adjustment layer here, and we'll just bring it up and apply it right on top. What this is doing is this is allowing us to make a second lumetri without affecting this entire color tab. We'll just take this adjustment layer, apply it to the top, and notice there's no lumetri color effects to any of this. And we're just gonna bump the exposure up just a touch. We'll go up a half a stop. Now, if we turn this off, we're back to our original, turn this back on, and we've got a little bit of an exposure bump in this. And the other thing we can do is this is looking a little bit cooler under here, as it should without having all this sunlight, but I kind of want to bump the temperature just a little bit. So we're just going to ride this just a touch and see what it looks like. I don't want it to get too warm. Let's just bring this back. We'll just make a small adjustment in the temperature, and let's just see how that compares to the one before. I think these look pretty good coming into this next one. That's pretty good there. So by adding that adjustment layer above the adjustment layer we already had, we're able to make minimal changes to that one clip rather than all the clips. So now later on, like I said, if we go back and make an adjustment to our main color layer, it's not going to affect everything else. So the next thing we want to do is we want to check the rest of our footage and see how it looks. Make sure everything flows with the same look. And so far everything looks pretty good. It all matches pretty well. This clip right here may need a little bit of an adjustment to it. And then coming on in, these look pretty good. You notice here we're losing a little bit of the light, but I still like the way this looks and matches. It shows a little bit of a time change because we went from where it was a little bit brighter here. We've traveled a couple miles through the timber and across a mountain, and now we're coming out into this valley and time has passed. So we see a little bit of a time change there with that, and you can kind of see in the background the sun setting behind the mountain, and that's allowing us to kind of see more of a time change. This clip here, it's a little bit too saturated in the ground with those yellows. We can adjust that, and overall, I mean, I think all this matches pretty well. So let's go back to this clip here. So this one I think is a little bright, so we'll bring another color adjustment in. Set it to the length of this clip. Make sure we select this adjustment layer. Let's just bring this exposure down a little bit and come over here to our curves. We're just going to set points so we don't adjust the entire thing again. We're just going to bring these highlights down just a bit. I think that's looking pretty good, and I just want to also bring the saturation down just a little bit here. So let's just drop it just a touch. We're just going to set it at 95. And if we turn that off, back on, you see a little bit of an adjustment. I like the way that looks. Kind of matches this clip a little bit more here. Now, coming on into this other clip that we said was a little bit too saturated. This can easily be adjusted. Again, bring your color adjustment over here. Set it to the same time frame as your clip. Come to our curves, and we're just going to do this hue versus saturation again. We're going to select these yellow, orange, and we're just going to bring that saturation down, see what it looks like. Well, we don't want to go too far. I think that's looking pretty good there. Overall, all this matches pretty well, and it's all done in one color adjustment layer that we just dropped on the timeline, did our color correction on, and then it applies it to the entire thing. And if we need to make other little adjustments, we use other adjustment layers, and boom, you've got a color graded sequence. Now, the only other thing I think I want to do to this is we can kind of give this a little bit more of a look. What I like to do to some of my footage is kind of bring these shadows up and give it a faded look. And so if you look over here at our waveform, when we start down here at the bottom where it was, we've got our bottom of our blacks here at the 0. But what we're doing is we're just raising that up. And what that's doing is fading the shadows. We don't want to fade too much, we just want to add a little bit of a fade. And that just gives it a little bit more of a look. I'm liking the way this looks. You can do the same thing with the highlights. Bring those down. You'll notice in the waveform you're bringing the tops of the highlights down. We don't want to do that here because I like the blue in the sky and I want to keep that detail. This overall looks pretty good to me, and this is very easily done once you have an idea of how to color correct without using LUTs. You can color correct pretty much all S-Log footage without using LUTs, and don't let anybody tell you you need to use them. So you're able to see we were able to color grade without using LUTs. It's very easy to do, and you shouldn't let anybody tell you you have to use a LUT, because you don't need a LUT to color grade S-Log footage or any other log footage. Raw footage, maybe a little bit depending on how you're grading that. And we'll get to that in another video when we look at color grading red raw footage, but we're not gonna do that in this video. This video is more focused on what most of us are gonna be using, which is gonna be DSLR cameras that are shooting just no picture profile, and it's just baked in, and we wanna make changes to that slightly, or we're using log footage to stretch that dynamic range and get a little bit more detail and information in our footage, so that way we can make more adjustments. Depending on what you're shooting for and what look you're going for will depend on whether you're using S-Log or any other log formats, or just using standard color out of the camera. So moving on, I will show you how to color grade using LUTs, and I've got a few LUTs that I'll show you that I really like because of the look that they bring this footage. You don't need LUTs as we just showed you, but if you have LUTs or you want to look into getting LUTs, I will show you how to use LUTs, and they're pretty simple, and you'll just make slight adjustments again as you go forward. So the first one we'll look at is the LUT that you're seeing on me now, and we'll go ahead and make adjustments to that to make it fit this image. So let's go ahead and jump back in and check out this LUT on this footage from Colorado. So we're back here in Premiere. We don't want to get rid of this color grade because I want to be able to compare these. So we're just going to turn these layers off. We're going to bring another color layer in up top and drag this out over the entire sequence again. We'll select that adjustment layer. We're going to come up here to our basic correction. So we're going to come over here to the input LUT, and then we're going to select the drop down menu and hit browse. And this is going to open up my folder with all my LUTs in it. We're going to be using this AC Kodak-ish first. And what we're going to want to pay attention to is the S-Log2, and then these 1 over, 1 under, 2 over, 3 over. When looking at that, the 1 under, 1 over, whatever it may be, what that is pertaining to is your exposure. When you shoot S-Log footage or any other log footage, generally you want to overexpose by 2 stops. And I don't really know the reason why you want to overexpose. That's just how the log footage works, and it's a lot easier to bring back those highlights than it is to bring back those shadows. So what we're going to do is, this footage was shot more at 1 stop over, so we're going to use this AC Kodak-ish 1 over because we are 1 stop overexposed. So we'll go ahead and we're going to apply this AC Kodak-ish S-Log2 1 over. So select that, hit open, and that's going to go ahead and apply this LUT to the footage. So we'll come back over here to the clip that we started with earlier. And the reason I like this LUT is because of the look that it gives the footage. You got some more teal blues, it's a little bit warmer, desaturated, and it's just got a specific look to it. So taking a LUT like this, overall, again, it applies to the footage, and all this footage was shot within the same time frame. So it's all gonna have a pretty similar look. And I like the look that this LUT gives the footage. Again, this is my favorite LUT, so I'm maybe a little bit biased, but we'll make some slight adjustments. And the first thing I want to do is just bump the temperature a little bit. Again, warm it up, and then we'll come down here to our curves, just add our shadows and highlights again. Let's just brighten it up just a touch. Bring those shadows down ever so little. And overall, I think it's looking pretty good there. We'll turn those off and back on. It's adding a little bit of contrast, making this look pretty good. We can come back up here to basic correction and maybe bump up this exposure just a touch more. See what we think. And I'm liking the way that's looking. The skin tones don't look funky. They're pretty good skin tones. Our trees are still green. Our grass is keeping that yellow look I was going for. So let's compare this to the last one we had. So we'll go ahead and we'll turn this off, turn this back on. So the image that we color graded by hand that we didn't use LUTs has a more natural look to it, in my opinion. It's very lush, the greens are true, the yellows are true. Everything looks pretty good, but the grade with the LUT has a different look to it. And so in my opinion, LUTs for the most part are going to be used to give a different look to the footage. It's more of a creative thing to me. And you can use other LUTs, and we'll look at one in a minute, that's gonna be more of getting you to the point of where we just did our hand color grade. And from there, you can add creative LUTs, and those creative LUTs will give you more of that look. So the next thing we're gonna look at is a LUT that's just gonna bring us from S-Log to Rec 709. It's not gonna have all those creative aspects like this other LUT does, the AC Kodak-ish. What this LUT's gonna do is, it's basically gonna take what we did when we hand graded, but do it all with one simple step of adding a LUT. It's gonna look a little bit different because it's not gonna be the exact same grade, but it's gonna be easy manipulated to get back to where we were if you don't wanna go through all those steps of hand grading. But I think you have more control of the image when you hand grade and then add a creative LUT later or do the creative adjustments on your own. So let's go ahead and look at what this looks like if we just go and add that simple LUT that's going to bring us to the 709. So we're back in here in Premiere. We're going to turn off this adjustment layer, and then we are going to bring a new adjustment layer in, bring it across our entire timeline here. So we notice all these other adjustment layers are off, so we have no color affecting. And then we are going to come up here to the input LUT again, select the drop down menu, and come over here to browse. So you might ask, what is Rec 709? Well, Rec 709 is just a color space, and that's going to be the color space that your standard HD TV uses. So Rec 709 is going to be what your camera is going to shoot if you're not using a picture profile or S-Log or anything like that, and you're just using the standard color settings out of your camera. So what we're going to do is we're going to go and we're going to take this S-Log and bring it back to Rec 709. And you might ask, well, why don't you just shoot the regular picture profile in the camera and not use S-Log if you're just going to bring it back to 709? So the reason for that, when you record in log, you're giving more stops of dynamic range to your footage, so you're able to make more adjustments in post. And ultimately, you're creating more information with the computer to work with, so that way you can make more adjustments to the footage and get that clean, crisp look, and also apply more of a creative look instead of just having a standard Rec 709. So let's go ahead, we'll get back here in the computer and I'll go ahead and show you this LUT. So we're gonna go ahead and apply this S-Log2 to 709 1 over. And that's just gonna bring us from S-Log to Rec 709. So you're gonna see on the footage here that this is very close to what our original color looked like before we did some more creative adjustments like changing our temperature and our tint and so on. So we'll go ahead and we'll turn this one off and we'll look at that original color layer. And you can see they look pretty similar, except this one has all these color changes that we did because we got into a more deep color grade. But if we wanted to start off, this would be a good place to start with the standard LUT. And then we could come over here, we'll make those same adjustments. We'll bump up our temperature, we'll bump up our tint a little bit here. You notice here before we make any adjustments that our curves are pretty good. So our highlights are up at the top and our shadows are pretty close to where they were before. We'll bring them back down a little bit more. And then we can also bring up these shadows here and give this a little bit of a fade like we did. Come down here to our hue versus hue. Make some adjustments here, warm that grass up, make it a little bit more orange. We will do the same with the blues, make the sky a little bit of a deeper blue. Come over here, saturate our trees again in the greens. Saturate our sky a little bit in the blues. Now this is looking a lot closer to what our original image was. We need to apply a little bit of saturation to the entire image here. Push this back up, and going back and looking at these two, I think they look pretty darn close. But if I'm being honest, I like our hand grade better. So that's that. You know, you can grade with LUTs, without LUTs. Preferably looking at this, I like the way it looks with our hand grade better than it does with the standard Rec 709 LUT. Now, I didn't go as deep into the color grade process. You can probably make them look almost identical, but ultimately what that S-Log2 to Rec 709 LUT is doing is those basic steps that we did in the hand grade up front. But if you don't want to rely on a LUT and you want to do it all by hand, it's very easy to do, and you really only have to do it once because you can use that adjustment layer and apply it to all your footage. So there may be a few extra steps in the beginning, but it's not going to save you too much time to use a LUT, and you're going to have more control when you do it all by hand. So with all that being said, that's all we've really got for today, guys. If you don't want to use LUTs, we've just proven you don't have to use them. People may tell you you have to use LUTs to color grade log footage, but that couldn't be anywhere further from the truth. We just showed it to you. You just learned how to do it by hand. And I hope you can go forward, color grade footage, and you're not afraid to use log footage because it's really simple to work with. You just have to make some slight adjustments in the beginning, and it pretty much brings your footage all the way back to that Rec 709 look, and from there you can get creative and add your own look. So again, don't worry about using LUTs if you don't have them, if you can't afford them. But if you want to use them, there are great LUTs out there to use, and there's great times to use those LUTs. So with that being said, I hope this video was able to help you. I hope you liked what you saw, and if so, I want you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel. Give this video a like and share it with your friends, and I will see you in the next one.